More. This celebration of Guam's 77th will air on PBS Guam, KGTF, Channel 12, and streaming on the PBS Guam Facebook and YouTube pages. This special broadcast is made possible by PBS Guam, our generous supporters, and Choice Broadcasting.
One of America's top radio personalities, Jim Bohannon, brings his wit, wisdom, and natural charm to listeners on Guam. Voted one of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America, The Jim Bohannon Show brings listeners a unique blend of breaking news, interesting features, and informative reports on a spectrum of topics. The Jim Bohannon Show, Saturday through Monday from 6 to 9 p.m. and a Sunday morning bonus show from 6 to 9 a.m. Jim Bohannon on Guam's only news talk superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Goodbye to Bagram. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The U.S. military and coalition forces have completed their withdrawal from what was the epicenter on the war on al-Qaeda for nearly 20 years, exiting the Bagram Air Base near Kabul, Afghanistan, and handing it over to Afghan forces. At the peak of its operation, Bagram Airfield saw more than 100,000 U.S. troops pass through. Search and rescue crews have returned to the rubble pile at the collapsed South Florida condominium. They'd been kept away from it for 15 hours Thursday when it appeared part of the building still standing was in danger of collapse.
There are restrictions based on the advice of structural engineers. Right now, teams can only work on 3 of the 9 grids mapped out at the site of the Surfside building collapse.
Our team of engineers is doing ongoing testing and evaluation as we work to expand the search area as quickly as possible as it becomes safe to do so.
Mayor Daniela Levine Cava also announced they're working on plans to demolish the part of the building that is still standing. They have to evaluate the conditions at the site and plan everything out so it doesn't disrupt the momentum of first responders.
Reporter Maricela Burgos of Fox affiliate WSVN in Miami. President Biden visited Surfside Thursday, meeting with some of the rescuers and family members of the dead and the missing. The president sharply critical of the U.S. Supreme Court after the justices, by a 6-3 vote, upheld voter security laws in Arizona, including one that makes ballot harvesting illegal.
The ability of a state legislative body to come along and vote, their legislature vote to change who is declared the winner, I find to be somewhat astounding. The decision and another striking down a California law requiring certain political donors to be listed with the state are fueling calls from the left to pack the court. America is listening to Fox News.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Bank Pacific. Happy 67th anniversary. Viva Bank Pacific!
Bank Pacific, serving our Pacific communities for 67 years. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Not guilty pleas Thursday from the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer after being indicted.
Alan Weisselberg pleaded not guilty to federal tax crime charges, 15 counts in all that include fraud and theft. While at this point there is no sign that the former president would be charged, Trump Organization attorney Alan Futerfast says that appears to be the state's aim.
If the name of the company was something else, I don't think these charges would have been brought.
New York State Attorney General Letitia James called the charges important in an investigation that continues. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Some 130 countries have now backed a global minimum tax, part of a worldwide effort to keep multinational firms from dodging taxes by shifting their profits to countries with low tax rates. The agreement announced by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development also provides for taxing the largest global companies in countries where they earn profits through online business but may not have a physical presence. The deal will now be discussed at the Group of 20 meeting later this year in the hopes of finishing the details by October. Wildfires fueled by bone-dry brush and timber are surging through Northern California forests, burning several homes and forcing thousands to flee, even as authorities worry that a hot, crowded July 4th weekend could bring the threat of new fires. In the NBA semifinals on Thursday.
No Giannis, no worries for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Out of the way into the lane for Lopez. What a night for Brook Lopez.
Marv Albert on TNT. Brook Lopez with the slam as part of a game-high 33 points for him. Also a career high in the playoffs for the Bucks big man as Milwaukee tops the Atlanta Hawks Thursday 123-112. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Bobby Portis all finishing with 22 points or more in that win for Milwaukee. Middleton and Holiday winding up with double-doubles on the night as the Bucks now lead the Eastern Conference Finals 3-2 with a chance to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals on Saturday. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hoffaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and situos mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Diving in, seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free TOCA app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOCA or install the free TOCA app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a rule that applies even in California, believe it or not. And I've got a little news bit from California for today, as I so often do. This comes from Town Hall by a gentleman named Matt Vespa. And the headline of the article is California City has found a new way to penalize Americans for exercising their Second Amendment rights. No! Of course, California would do this since it's the mecca of bad ideas. Giving illegal aliens state benefits is a bad idea. High taxes are a bad idea. The lockdown regime it had under COVID, under Wuhan virus, was a terrible idea, so bad that Governor Gavin Newsom faces a recall election. And the state always has had wildfires that burn out of control because it never, ever wants to do any preemptive measures, like controlled burns, because the green freaks throw tantrums. Yeah. California is a progressive cesspool. California is a progressive cesspool, which is why people are leaving. Even Bill Maher noted how the state is wrapped in red tape. And the Golden State also now knows how to engage in grossly unconstitutional actions against the Second Amendment. In San Jose, the city is mulling charging gun owners to cover the cost of firearms-related violence. Here's a quote from Axios. San Jose will require gun owners to compensate taxpayers for gun-related emergency responses, the San Francisco Chronicle reports. It's the first U.S. city to take such a step. The move, approved unanimously by the San Jose City Council on Tuesday comes after last month's mass shooting at a transit station in the city. The big picture, the ordinance requires every firearm owner to buy liability insurance coverage and pay an annual fee for medical and police responses to gun-related injuries and deaths, the Chronicle reports. Where is Dionne Warwick now that we really need her? Do you know the way to San Jose? If you do, try really hard to forget about it. Officials haven't decided how much gun owners would be required to pay annually, but the amount would be determined following a gun harm study from the Pacific Institute on Research and Evaluation, which is expected to be completed this fall. In a preliminary report, the Institute estimated that gun-related homicides, suicides, and shootings cost San Jose about $63 million annually, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. Yeah, well, you can bet that there's going to be legal challenges here, penalizing law-abiding Americans for exercising their constitutional right to own firearms and making them pay for the acts of criminals. Firearms reporter and expert Steve Gutowski of a publication called The Reload touched on this point and zeroed in on the illiberal and illegal underpinnings of this ordinance. San Jose is forcing gun owners to pay fees in order to offset the cost of criminal acts seems odd, as it lays the blame for violence with people who aren't responsible for it. Requiring residents to purchase liability insurance before they can own a gun is akin to requiring them to purchase libel insurance before they can speak in the public sphere. Because someone might libel somebody else, right? Both proposals are ripe for legal challenge, and I wouldn't be surprised if the ultimate outcome of this is the city being forced to pay the legal fees of whichever gun right groups wins the race to file suit against them. One can hope, as these legal challenges also take a lot of time and money, it would be a great way to stick it to the city. We'll find out eventually. Thus far, this ordinance is in the draft mode, only for lack of better term. But this is blue bastion politics. It's probably going to pass in the near future, and lawyers will be waiting. Well, this article mentioned that people are leaving California, and I saw an article last month, that said that the outflow is greater than the inflow for the first time in the history of California. More people are moving out than moving in. And a lot of them are going to Texas. And a lot of them are going to Florida. And it's such a pity. I remember, back in my college days, people thought that if you could get a job teaching school in California, that was the best. Nice weather, beautiful scenery, higher pay than the rest of the country. Everything seemed to be so nice in California. It's no wonder they called it the Golden State. But it turned out that all that glitters is not gold. If you polish brass and do it if you got the right kind of brass and you polish it just right, it looks like gold. But it will tarnish and turn green, and that's exactly what California has done in both senses of the word. It has turned green.
It's a fool's gold.
It's a complete fool's gold, no doubt about it. Okay, let's go to Zemi Yakotny and see why neither of the papers wrote a real editorial today. The PDN shows that the folks in the editorial boardroom have an incredibly swift and sure grasp of the obvious. Really, all you need to know about this editorial is the title: Governor's decision will allow Guam to restart tourist industry.
You don't say.
Really? I'd have never thought of that in a million years.
Maybe they have a 4-day weekend.
Maybe.
Started yesterday.
Yeah. Don't remind me of that, Jose. A 3-day weekend, you know. Bad enough that today is Friday, but then 3 days ahead and no tall tales. It's going to be tough. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to waste any time on this so-called editorial. And then we've got the Post. While boosting tourism, elected officials should address the needs of Guamanians. Tourists typically travel to international destinations because they have disposable cash to spend. And they don't need to be offered $500 by the government of Guam if they've already decided to make the trip, because the island has clean air, blue skies, quiet beaches, American dining and shopping experiences to beckon them. If a $500 enticement from Guam tips tourist destinations decisions in favor of Guam's favor, then they're not likely the kind of well-heeled, high-rolling tourists Guam has been trying to seek out for the benefit of a broader island economy. And I want to just interject something here for the moment. I follow what's going on in Hawaii in general, Honolulu in particular. And a lot of folks are saying, you know, we realized during the pandemic how badly we screwed up, because we could actually live in Honolulu in those days. But now that the tourists are starting to come back, it's so crowded. Like 10 million visitors a year.
I think I saw a picture of this one swimming hole that's usually barren. There is like elbow to elbow tourists.
So it's just crowded, and a lot of the tourists are cheap tourists from Asia coming to Honolulu. And I'll give you an autobiographical experience. I was there in 2019, since you can't fly through Japan on Delta anymore, which is what I did for years and years and years. I had to go through Honolulu, spent a couple of days there, visited an old friend, etc. Stayed in Ala Moana, and it used to be a real treat, you know, to go to the States, stay in Ala Moana Hotel, go to the shopping center, walk around Waikiki, maybe go swimming on the... It's no fun at all anymore. It's not fun at all. We were on like the 33rd floor of the Ala Moana, not beachside, but the other side. And there was a balcony, but there was no sense going out on the balcony, because even on the 33rd floor, you had that big city rumble, a combination of air conditioners, tire noise, etc. It wasn't even quiet on the 33rd floor. So if it weren't for the palm trees, you might just as well go to Chicago and stay in the Loop. It's just no different. So I hope that, you know, as we come out of this, of course, there's an old saying, beggars can't be choosers. I don't know if we'll ever get out of this, but if we can, we should concentrate on exactly what this editorial is talking about. Well-heeled, high-rolling tourists trying to seek out the benefit of the broader island economy. So not so many of them, but the ones that will spend more money. Back to the editorial. Governments across the nations are fighting to revive their economies by drawing tourists back to their museums, shopping centers, and historic sites. And at least with Hawaii and even the neighboring Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, we're fighting for some of the same tourists. Guam Tourist Recovery Task Force is considering giving $500 in the form of debit card to the first 5,000 tourists who travel to Guam. That's a $2.5 million price tag for the local government. Now, I'd say that this is the kind of behavior that you'd expect from a drunken sailor, except I got too much respect for drunken sailors. No drunken sailor would do anything that dumb. The governor needs to give her support and funding commitment for the idea to fly. The hope is that the amount of money invested into the program will generate tourist dollars at hotels, restaurants, clothing stores, car rentals. The tourist dollars will, hopefully, mean businesses can stay open longer, which means they'll hire more people. This is particularly important as the expiration dates for various federal assistance programs loom before us. The last of the economic impact payments will be paid out before the end of this year. And also the pandemic unemployment assistance and other unemployment programs funded by the federal government over the past 2 years will come to an end in just a couple months. Even with more than $2 billion in federal assistance and stimulus funds flowing into our economy, we're not seeing enough funds get into the hands of local businesses and local residents, which would allow them to shop at stores and patronize restaurants to help stimulate the economy. Guamanians could use some of that cash being contemplated for tourists. My old Aunt Florence, charity begins at home. GovGuam has been slow to implement the Recovery, Income, Support, and Empowerment Act, the RISE Act, which GovGuam is not going to implement. They're going to implement Lou's executive order because she has to include government employees.
Alt-RISE.
Yeah, Alt-RISE, yeah. The initial program authorized by lawmakers would provide a one-time benefit of $800 for single taxpayers, $600 for $16 for joint filers who are not local or federal government employees or retirees. The governor later issued an executive order expanding the eligibility to all Guamanians with the law's prescribed annual income tax caps for single filers and $80,000 for joint filers. Not exactly right, because she's not implementing Raging Lee's bill. She's implementing her own executive order, which she is able to do because of the old Wong versus Camino rule. But even after including government workers in the RISE Act program, the governor previously acknowledged she is not keen on raising the original budget of $30 million. With the $30 million, Guam's private sector workforce of about 45,000 would have received about $600 each under the, quote, RISE Act. But the expansion of the RISE Act beneficiaries to include the government sector widened the pool to more than 60,000. Yeah, but she can't use local funds for it. She has to use these federal funds. Get your facts straight here, Post. Well, Guam gains by boosting tourism. Elected officials also should address fully the needs of Guamanians. All right, so
just an opinion, but I think how some people seem to give you a good deal, but it's actually a worse deal, so that your deal gets undermined. This introduction of the All Rise Act was kind of her way of getting back at the legislatures who try to interfere in her duties as a governor.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely, because Lee's bill said, the $800 or $1,600, but not for government employees. Good reason for that. She said, use your money, Governor. Use your Wong versus Camino money. Or if you aren't able to do that, use local funds. And she grumbled. I'm not going to sign this. I'm going to let it become law without my signature because I really don't like it. I can't pass 3 times and sit in my seat for 2 minutes like they do over there. And then she comes out with this All Rise Act, which copies the bracket that Lee set forth in her bill and adds in government employees to it, and she's going to pay it with Wong versus Camino money. So it really kind of makes Lee's bill moot, and it kind of makes the hope of putting money in somebody's pocket moot, unless they happen to be tourists. And then we're going, we need the money so bad so badly that we're going to pay tourists to come to our island to spend money. Yeah, that's
makes no sense.
Makes no sense at all, does it? All right, so let's go from there to the card. Do you want to take a break, Jose?
It's up to you.
Well, let's take a short break.
All right, let's do it.
Circle K brings you the G-Dog. Get ready for a succulent and flavorful street hot dogs made famous in New York City. These dogs are made with 100% all beef and cooked in a delicious blend of spices for a plump, juicy hot dog experience that's bursting with flavor. Visit your nearest participating Circle K and dig in on the best hot dog experience on island. The G-Dog, served from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Available at Anigua, Denado, and Ocean Vista Circle K locations only. Circle K, hey, take it easy.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are with today's card. And the first item on the card is the Daily Caller versus Underwood and Bavacqua. And this is a pickup on Tom Wood versus Underwood. Underwood wrote a column for the Daily News where he shows that he really doesn't understand what critical race theory is, doesn't have a clue, but he knows enough about it to be able to criticize people who say that it is a bad thing and a threat to our society. So the Daily Caller, a conservative email that I read from time to time, I think really lays it out on him. And then, of course, Underwood and Bavacqua are the Westpac distributors for critical race theory, and Bavacqua doesn't disappoint again today in one of his columns. The classic example of take something that someone may have said 70 years ago or more, pretend that it happened today, apply today's, use presentism, applies today's morals, ethics, etc. to it, and then say racism, and the only thing we can do, we can't fix it, we just have to get out of this. And for him, getting out of it means to separate Guam from the United States. Then we've got Shea versus Therese. This is Tom Shea, and Tom Shea says that if that bill passes, he's leaving the island. And you could hear a chorus of people in the medical community saying, "Do you promise?" Yeah. So it looks like Therese is getting some assistance from a rather unexpected source. Of course, we will miss Tom Shea down at Skinner Plaza with his White Coats for Black Lives Matter demonstrations. Then we got George Macris, a guy who practiced medicine here at one time. George was never known for being an establishment conformist. And he wrote a column or letter to the editor yesterday, and I've pegged this item as Macris versus the docs, the medical establishment. And then we've got the Carl versus the Shippo. Now, back during election season, we used to have 3 Carls that posted and called. We had our Carl, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. We had another tailgater named Carl. And then we had the former governor of Guam, Carl T.C. Gutierrez, who was known as the Carl. It's sort of like the real Carl, right? So today on the card, we've got the Carl versus the Shippo. That's an interesting combination. And then we've got the Supremes versus the ACLU and the NAACP. This is the latest Supreme Court case. Once again, the good guys won. And I've got a good column by my favorite columnist, Jonathan Turley, that lays that out. There was another victory, an Arizona election law victory that the Supreme Court allowed the good guys to win. I'll pick that up on Monday. And I'm calling it the Supremes, not the Supreme Court, because there was a time when it was kind of neat to refer to the Supreme Court as the Supremes.
I thought you were going to start talking about Diana Ross.
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, well, Diana Ross and the Supremes were a great musical group. I wish we could get music like that nowadays. That was real music.
Ain't no mountain high enough.
Yeah. So that was real music. So it was Diana Ross and the Supremes. Well, California had a Chief Justice named Rose Bird. And Rose Bird made quite a name for herself because she turned the entire California Supreme Court against capital punishment, which was legal in California. But no matter where the case came from in California, no matter what the basis for the appeal was, Rose and the rest of the members of the California Supreme Court were able to find some reason not to let the death penalty go forward. This kind of foreshadows a later item in the card, by the way. So Rose became Rose Bird became a national figure because of her stand against capital punishment. And some wag, not me, although it's the kind of thing I'm capable of doing, started referring to the California Supreme Court as Rose Bird and the Supremes.
Nice.
Yeah, which could have made a really great rock group, right? Rose Bird and the Supremes.
For the record.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next item on the card is Biden versus some death penalty. He has told his Attorney General, let's see, what's his name? I had it right on the tip of my tongue here. Let me find that a sec here. I just had it a minute ago. Garland, yeah. What's his first name?
Merrick Garland.
Yeah, Merrick Garland, yeah. Boy, did we dodge a bullet there, huh? You know, when Obama nominated Merrick Garland and Mitch McConnell said, no, we're not going to even schedule hearings for that guy. You know, I said, maybe that's not a really good idea. He doesn't look so bad. You know, we've already politicized the Supreme Court so much. He might be all right. Boy, was I wrong.
Nope.
He's your worst nightmare. He's bought into critical race theory, all of the idiot ideas of the Obama and the Biden administration. But Joe Biden has ordered him no more executions until we have a study and determine what's going on. I've got an article on that.
Unless you're in the womb.
Exactly. So if you are one of these fortunate souls that happens to be on death row in a California prison, you're going to get to live for a while. But if you're one of these unlucky people that happens to be in the womb of a mother who understands what childbirth is all about, quoting attorney Vanessa Williams, it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. So if you happen to be have the wrong number on your mother's choice roulette wheel, you're going to suffer the death penalty. So I don't know exactly how to draft this, but maybe I could put together a statute and send it off to the California legislature that would allow unborn children to be treated as favorably as death row inmates in California.
You would think.
Yeah. That's probably asking for too much, right? In California. Then I've got Biden, as you were, I've got Biden versus Harris. And there have been a couple of stories floating around that, Biden is dissing Harris. Biden is not sending Harris to the Tokyo Olympics. He's sending Dr. Jill Biden to the Olympics.
Put the lime in the coconut.
So I've got an article on that, and I'm just wondering if it could be that Joe Biden is finally saying to himself, this identity politics is great. I'm gonna select a woman, a black woman, to be my vice president. But, maybe meritocracy isn't such a bad idea after all. Maybe if I had a vice president that had some talent, when I put her in charge of our immigration problem, she might have actually done something, except tell us that she'd never been to Europe. All right, that's the card for the day. So let's start out with Daily Caller versus Underwood. Now, you'll recall that yesterday, or it was 2 days ago actually, Robert Underwood in his column came out and set us straight on a lot of things. He said, these days everyone is talking about critical race theory, and it's really fashionable to complain that its own opponents don't really know what it is, and that they're just a bunch of stupid racist rubes. But we do know what it is, which is why we oppose it. Now, wait a minute, I got the wrong article here. I got to go to Underwood's article. I knew that sounded too smart for Underwood. Yeah, in Underwood's article, he told us that the deep state was like the McCarthy era, where communists were working against American interests in the State Department. I had to take about 10 minutes to explain who Joe McCarthy was, what that was all about, and how it was really an inapt comparison. And later on, he enlightens us about critical race theory. He says the latest label is critical race theory. At its root, it is a historical or social analysis about the role and effects of race in our lives. Various forms of critical race theory have been in American society since its very beginning. No, Robert. It just worked the other way. According to many, but not all of the founding fathers, the racial characteristics of African Americans made them suitable for slavery, and the savagery of indigenous people meant that taking their land was the best for all concerned. When modern critical race theory challenged these original ideas, we are now told that this is dangerous. We are advised not to think about racist assumptions of laws and practices in history of the U.S. going back 20 generations. If you do this, you will learn to hate America and Americans, especially white ones. The possibility of strengthening America seems to be out of the question. America is so fragile it needs to be constantly praised it were willed without criticism. Critical race theory is such a theory it is being banned in several states. Now that state strikes to me as real political correctness. Banning analysis is real political correctness, and it being given a place in some of our deepest red states. When democracy depends on banning ideas and regulating speech, it's in trouble. Well, once again, he misses the mark. No one is saying that it's not a good idea to study critical race theory. I spent an awful lot of time studying it myself, explaining it, etc. That's not the danger. The danger is that our institutions, our colleges, our schools, our military is coercing people into practicing critical race theory. dividing all people. First of all, telling everybody that no matter what it is you're looking at, it's all about race. You know, the construction project where the government's building a road, no, that's about race. Everything is about race. Kind of like the insular cases in Tina. Everything is about race. The deck is stacked against you if you are a BIPOC, black, indigenous people of color, and the stackers are the oppressors, the white folks. And because the United States was founded on slavery, the systemic racism is so embedded in American society that it can't be fixed. Reform is out of the question. We've got to junk it, and we've got to go to something else. Now, people who actually understand critical race theory know that it's a Marxist tactic. And the junk what we got and go to something else is Marxism. To each according to his needs, from each according to his ability, so on. So, you know, Robert is even wrong on his facts. And I have an article here that ran in the Daily Caller dealing with education. And this is the title. The founders of critical race theory once got together and marveled about how it was taking over education. A little gloating here. Supporters of critical race theory often argue that it's not being promoted in K-12 schools. But two law professors who are considered among the founders of the legal subdiscipline once praised its growing influence in education in a 2010 interview. Richard Delgado and his wife Jean Stefancic, both professors at the University of Alabama School of Law, have authored numerous texts about CRT, critical race theory. The two spoke about their legal scholarship in an interview featured in the winter 2010 edition of Transnational Law and Contemporary Problems, a multidisciplinary legal journal at the University of Iowa. CRT holds that America is fundamentally racist, yet it teaches people to view every social interaction and person in terms of race. Its adherents pursue anti-racist through the end of merit, objective truth, and the adoption of race-based policies. It's a little hard to read here. The journal stated that CRT energized legal scholarship during the 1980s. The framework to analyze and understand how race and America's racial history shape American laws. And that was just called critical studies or critical theory. It also noted that critical race theory has taken root in other disciplines such as sociology and education. Boy, is that true. In the 2010 interview, Stefancic said educators began to hear about CRT in the 90s, and some started out studying basic writings in the hope of finding ideas they could apply to education. She noted that education scholars began adopting CRT in order to figure out ways to address, quote, inadequacies in matters like curriculum and standardized testing. Well, they figured out how to address inequities in standardized testing. Just don't do it anymore. Because if you have standardized testing, it's one more example of white supremacy, because BIPOCs don't get in as often, get into the elite schools like they should. Delgado added that proponents of CRT found a natural affinity in education. In the interview, he spoke critically of concepts like race neutrality and color blindness. I've talked about this before. To me, that should be the objective, race neutrality and color blindness. But Delgado spoke negatively about them in education and claimed that teachers do not actually treat students equally. Seeing critical race theory take off in education has been a great satisfaction for the two of us, Delgado said. Critical race theory is in some ways livelier in education right now than it is in law, where it was a mature movement that settled down by comparison. Delgado also referred to the founders of CRT as, quote, a bunch of Marxists in the 2010 interview. He said dozens of legal scholars, this is embarrassing, Jose. He said dozens of legal scholars had gathered at the University of Wisconsin, which he called a, quote, center of legal a center of left academic legal thought.
That's Madison.
Yep. Paul Soglin, the former mayor of Madison, said that Dane County is 73 square miles of liberalism surrounded by reality. Delgado added that many conference attendees went on to become prominent critical race theorists, including Kimberly Crenshaw, a Columbia School professor who developed the theory of intersectionality. Intersectionality, which means this: if you could find a BIPOC, homosexual, transgender, that's as high as you could get in the racial hierarchy. And of course, the very bottom is whites. I think maybe Jews are even lower than whites. Yeah, could be. PMSNBC's host Joy Reid, for example, has repeatedly said on her show that CRT has nothing to do with K-12 education and has dismissed the work of anti-CRT thinkers like Christopher Rufo. But in schools across the country, teachers and administrators admit to teaching CRT in the classroom. Schools have also promoted the theory's key principles, including the claim that merit-based systems perpetuate inequity and white students must address their whiteness as a malignant force. You know, and Robert, I guess Robert must not read, must not go on the internet, must not watch TV, because this is everywhere and has taken over the country by storm. Okay, and then here's Michael Bavacqua's contribution for today. Bavacqua, Vicente Cruz Blas, appalled by treatment of blacks in the U.S.
Now I was ready for a modern story.
Yeah. Well, we got to find something that's so old that you can't really contradict it. Vicente Cruz Blas, known as Vicentindero, was born in 1893 and joined the Navy in the early years of the U.S. Naval Administration of Guam. In the 1930s, when the largest numbers of pre-war Chamorros joined the Navy, there were severe racial restrictions and segregation. Chamorros, like African Americans, Filipinos, Latinos, were only allowed to serve as mess attendants or officer stewards. Tun Vicente joined during World War I, and he worked on deck with the hopes of eventually becoming a bosun's mate. As soon as he left Guam for the U.S., he joined the boxing team to develop a good rapport with his crewmates. That's a good way to develop rapport with somebody. Punch him a lot. While at sea, Tun Vicente contracted tuberculosis and was transferred to a naval hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. Tun Vicente was familiar with American racism of the era, for part of it was imported to Guam. Chamorros had little to no rights on their own land. Now, how does Bavacqua know all this stuff? He wasn't born in 1893. He wasn't even born in 1938. The Chamorros had little to no rights. The Navy treated them like children in need of civilizing, but this racism was diffuse for most Chamorros, not really a regular part of their lives. When they were in their homes and on their ranches, the racism dimmed and seemed distant. But entering into the realms run directly by the Navy, it became hard to dismiss. For Tun Vicente, seeing the treatment of blacks by whites during this time in the U.S. appalled him. Some Chamorros assumed that they were met with American racism because of their status as non-citizens. But blacks were supposed to be real Americans, and he witnessed them being treated as less than even someone like him, who wasn't even a U.S. citizen and wasn't considered to be American at the time. I don't think that's what Amata Radewagen thinks. I think that Amata thinks that if you are a national, which is what Blas was, you are an American. The experience was one of many that gave Tun Vicente pause in terms of reckoning with the reality of America versus the rhetoric about it. In 1931, Tun Vicente joined the Guam Congress representing the village of Piti. The Congress had been created by the Navy and had no real authority. It could only offer the naval governor suggestions and recommendations. Tun Vicente joined others such as B.J. Berdallo and F.B. Leon Guerrero in advocating U.S. citizenship and greater political rights for the Chamorro people. When the decision was made to send representatives to Washington to lobby directly, Tun Vicente joined those efforts and had his children join with others to walk door to door in Hagatna singing songs and requesting donations. Now, this is after he'd been in the Navy and seen all of these horrible things, according to Bavacqua. But he still wants to be an American citizen. One of his children would later go on to be a very successful career in the Marines, being the first non-white Marine to reach the rank of general in 1977. He would also be elected the second non-voting delegate from Guam. His name was Ben Blas, a guy I knew really, really well. Worked in his first Washington rep campaign, as a matter of fact. In reflecting on his life, his father's, and the wider crest of Chamorro people for self-determination and justice, I think he's putting words in Ben Blas's mouth here. Ben wrote about a simple question his father asked him before he left Island to join the Marines. Why are we equal in war, but not in peace? More than 100 years after Tun Vicente's visit to South Carolina, questions like this still persist for us in the U.S. territories. Let's take a short break and I'll come back to Tun Vicente Blas.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vax and Win, Guam!
Hafaday, my name is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. I would like to thank everyone for their support of the ISA Guam LGBTQ Scholarship at the UOG Endowment Foundation. Your generous donation has helped us grow the scholarship to provide LGBTQ students the support they need to pursue their education. Although Pride Month is coming to an end, you can continue to support the scholarship by visiting give.uog.edu. For more information on how you can empower these future leaders, please call 735-2957.
Okay, so here we are back again, talking about Ben Blas and his father. An interesting anecdote about Blasses here on Guam. This kind of goes a little bit towards Bavacqua's point. But have you ever noticed that there are two Blasses, B-L-A-S and B-L-A-Z?
I noticed that.
Yeah, and it's the same familia. Yeah, different. Parejo, na familia T. Parejo y Ramos. But the reason that came along was because of Vicente, this very gentleman, Vicente, what was his full name here?
Cruz.
Yeah, Vicente Cruz Blas. there were 2 Vicente Cruz Blasses, and this didn't fit very well with Navy record keeping. So by administrative fiat, they changed 1 Vicente Cruz Blas to Z and left the other one as S.
And it stuck.
And it stuck, yeah. So, and you could do a whole program on what happened to the names, you know, like the Spanish custom is given name or Christian name, right? Father's name, mother's name last. So if we were to follow that custom for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we would call her Sandy Cortez. Because if she's following the Spanish custom, Cortez is her mother's name, Cortez. So you can imagine how much problem that caused the Navy when they got here, when they figure, well, the last name on the line has got to be your... So a lot of people got misnamed. They wound up with their mother's name instead of their father's name. So, you know, when the Spanish-American War ended and the United States wanted Guam for one simple reason, a coaling station. And I've explained this before, the imperialist powers in the United States didn't give a darn about Cuba. They wanted to declare war on Spain so they could take the Philippines away so they would have a good base for the China trade. The U.S. Pacific Fleet was in Hong Kong at the time that that Wilson declared war on Spain because of what may very well have been a false flag operation, the battleship Maine. And as soon as Wilson declared war, Teddy Roosevelt, who was in a position to do this, ordered the fleet to sail to Manila Bay and to capture Manila Bay to protect American shipping from the Spanish fleet, if you can imagine that. You know, the 3 old rowboats that the Spanish rode around Manila Bay.
Santa Maria and the Pinto and the Santa Maria.
Right. So, you know, the U.S. captured Manila Bay, went on to take over the entire country. And in the Treaty of Paris, the United States gave Spain $20 million for the Philippines. Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States. The United States said, we don't want Cuba. We want Cuba to be independent, something called the Teller Amendment in an act of Congress. And the United States could have had all of Spanish Micronesia, from the the Marianas, the Carolines, and the Marsh, could have had it all. But the United States said, we want Guam. So the Spanish ceded Guam to us, sold the rest of it to Germany at about the same time. And the reason we wanted Guam was because ships in those days burned coal. So a ship leaving Long Beach would sail to Honolulu, to Pearl Harbor, which we leased from the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1891, by the way. Sail into Pearl Harbor, load up with coal, sail to Guam, load up with coal, sail to Manila. And that worked out pretty well. In 1922, the United States entered into the Washington Naval Conference, which had to do with battleships primarily, but the United States agreed that it would not fortify Guam. The Japanese agreed they would not fortify the Marianas. They had their fingers crossed at the time. So there was a Marine seaplane base. In fact, the remnants are still there. There was a Marine seaplane squadron here that we had to deactivate because of the Washington Conference. Well, ships began to burn oil, so a coaling station really wasn't of much value anymore. So the United States kind of was stuck with Guam. We had it. It wasn't of any great use to us. There were people living here. A number of people had greatly increased because of improved sanitation and medical care after the Americans moved in. So it was kind of like Guam was a ship, a passenger ship. The Chamorros were passengers. The Navy was the crew, and they really didn't they really probably didn't know what exactly to do. So they did what came naturally, you know, started schools, taught the kids how to speak English, on and on and on. And it was, no getting around it, martial law. The naval governor, I'll come back to this right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The searching resumes. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. At that collapsed condominium building in Surfside, Florida, after an hours-long stand-down yesterday over safety concerns.
We're analyzing the building, the debris, and the pile. All that has to be constantly analyzed so that we can proceed with rescue operations on the scene.
That's Scott Nachman of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. There were signs that parts of the building still standing could fall down.
More than a half-day loss of search and rescue, critical time. Engineers reviewed the remaining structures, and around dinner time, they determined that their rescuers can go back, and they are there right now.
Fox's Matt Finn. With the safety stand-down Thursday, there were no changes in the numbers of the dead and the missing. President Biden visited yesterday to encourage first responders and console family members.
What amazed me at this group of people was their resilience, their absolute commitment, their willingness to do whatever it took to find an answer.
The president has authorized another $20 million federal dollars to help pay for the rescue efforts. The U.S. Supreme Court has upheld voting laws in Arizona, ruling that laws banning ballot harvesting and requiring ballots cast in the wrong precincts to be thrown out are not discriminatory. Arizona's Attorney General Mark Brnovich hopes this will stall moves to federalize local and state elections.
This shouldn't be an ideological issue. This is all about protecting the integrity of elections and making sure that states have the ability to conduct the time, place, and manner of their elections the way they want.
Afghanistan, the last U.S. and coalition forces have left the sprawling Bagram Air Base north of Kabul, handing control over it to the Afghan military. It's estimated more than 100,000 U.S. troops served at Bagram at one point or another. In the nearly 20 years it served as the U.S. largest military base in the country. Nearly all U.S. service people will be out of the rest of Afghanistan by September 11th. America is listening to Fox News.
Hafa my name is Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. I would like to thank everyone for their support of the ISA Guam LGBTQ Scholarship at the UOG Endowment Foundation. Your generous donation has helped us grow the scholarship to provide LGBTQ students the support they need to pursue their education. Although Pride Month is coming to an end, you can continue to support the scholarship by visiting give.uog.edu. For more information on how you can empower these future leaders, please call 735-2957.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Bank Pacific. Happy 67th anniversary. Viva Bank Pacific!
Bank Pacific, serving our Pacific communities for 67 years. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Not guilty pleas Thursday from the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer after being indicted.
Alan Weisselberg pleaded not guilty to federal tax crime charges, 15 counts in all that include fraud and theft. While at this point there is no sign that the former president would be charged, Trump Organization attorney Alan Futerfast says that appears to be the state's aim.
If the name of the company was something else, I don't think these charges would have been brought.
New York State Attorney General Letitia James called the charges important in an investigation that continues. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Some 130 countries have now backed a global minimum tax, part of a worldwide effort to keep multinational firms from dodging taxes by shifting their profits to countries with low tax rates. The agreement announced by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development also provides for taxing the largest global companies in countries where they earn profits through online business but may not have a physical presence. The deal will now be discussed at the Group of 20 meeting later this year in the hopes of finishing the details by October. Wildfires, fueled by bone-dry brush and timber, are surging through Northern California forests, burning several homes and forcing thousands to flee, even as authorities worry that a hot, crowded July 4th weekend could bring the threat of new fires. In the NBA semifinals on Thursday.
No Giannis, no worries for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Out of the way, into the lane for Lopez. What a night for Brook Lopez.
Marv Albert on TNT. Brook Lopez with the slam as part of a game-high 33 points for him. Also a career high in the playoffs for the Bucks big man as Milwaukee tops the Atlanta Hawks Thursday 123-112. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Bobby Portis all finishing with 22 points or more in that win for Milwaukee. Middleton and Holiday winding up with double-doubles on the night as the Bucks now lead the Eastern Conference Finals 3-2 with a chance to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals on Saturday. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Okay, so here we are back on Tall Tales after that great halftime show that we all like to see. The drill team, the marching band, the cheerleaders. Pretty soon we're going to have the synchronized card sections back up on the grandstand, too. So I just wanted to close up here with Tun Vicente and my good friend Ben Blas. This is classic Bavacqua, classic critical race theory. He starts out telling us, you know, these bad things that happened. And I am old enough to remember what it was like before the civil rights laws in the United States. I traveled through the South in the 50s and 60s. I have a pretty good idea what it was like. But, you know, the old saying is that was then, but this is now. We've done so much to straighten out those problems. As far as Guam was concerned, just before the break, I mentioned that Guam was truly under martial law from the time that Captain Glass pulled in here on his ship until the Organic Act became law in 1950. The naval governor, who was a naval officer, often a captain, sometimes an admiral, had plenary power. He was the judge, he was the legislative, executive, and judicial branch of the government. And we didn't have a judiciary here, a impartial judiciary to address the grievances of the people. It was martial law. There's no question about that. But my sense is this, that even though that's the way it was, the Chamorros didn't chafe under it, C-H-A-F-E, like they did under the Spanish. From what I've read about the Spanish regime, there were attempts to kill the Spanish governor. And, you know, certainly if you compare the Japanese occupation with the American martial law, there wasn't much of a comparison there. And this is the way I characterize it. It was basically because of the character of Americans, what the average American person is like, the average sailor, the average Marine that was here during that period of martial law, many of whom fell in love with local lovelies and committed to, and contributed to the local gene pool. I don't want to mention folks like Adolfo Scamboluri, or I don't remember Robert's father was, I think, a Marine. Not his father, his grandfather. The Pelicanis, the Scamboluris, etc., all of whom came here during that naval administration, and many of them who are still remembered today because their descendants are part of the community. So leave it to Bavacqua to go back to Vicente Cruz Blas, Ben's father, who took advantage of what little bit of legislature there was, petitioned for American citizenship and and a civil type government, etc. Was the father of someone that any father should be very proud of, a Marine Corps general. And Bavacqua takes this and once again turns it into a CRT, a critical race theory exercise, by saying, you know, things were bad then and they're still bad today. We have to judge what happened before 1950 with today's ethics, manners, and morals. That the system is so corrupt that there's no hope in the system for Chamorros. The only hope is to separate from the United States and become an independent country. So, you know, this is Bavacqua almost every week. No surprise here. I'm not going to repeat what I said about critical race theory. I have a caller online who has, from time to time, been known to repeat his key words. So go ahead, repeat.
Half a day, Uncle Bob and Real Joe. You know, I just wanted to ask you, did you ever hear General Blas tell his very funny story about when he went to go to school at Notre Dame and he got off the airplane in San Francisco and got into a taxi, not realizing that there's not just one Notre Dame in the whole of the United States?
No, I never heard that one. That sounds good. Let's hear it.
He tells a story that, he didn't know he didn't know there was more than one Notre Dame, so the taxi driver brought him over to the church, or I guess it was a church or a school combined. Then he realizes when he got there that that's definitely not the Notre Dame he wanted to go to, and so he had to take a bus. But that was just, one of his stories about his culture shock. He was a very humorous storyteller. But I also wanted to mention, there was another Chamorro guy that went over early on to go to school in college, and he he developed a case of jock itch, and he was so embarrassed about it. He didn't want to let anyone know or go to the doctor for it. So he tried to seek out his own remedy, and much to his chagrin, he found out the hard way that that's not what chili powder was for.
Yeah, well, that reminds me, Pete, of the Howley that came out here, you know, and it was new, but he wanted to fit in, so he tried to learn a little bit of Chamorro, and he thought, you know, if I could say a few things in Chamorro, maybe that would open some doors for me. So he was at the beach. He was drinking beer with some of the local boys, and he had to urinate. So he goes into the boonies and he sees another Chamorro back there a Chamorro guy doing the same thing. And it's one of those rare cool nights on the island, right? So the Howley thinks that, you know, a good way to start any conversation is to talk about the weather, right? So so he looks over at the Chamorro guy and he says, "Hey, pretty chilly." And the Chamorro guy says, "Dos más, Eli." Yeah.
Lost in translation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be a long weekend. Going to miss you guys. I just wanted to throw some humor in there.
Well, I really appreciate it, Repeat. And I hope you don't forget us over that long weekend. You know, you're one of our key tailgaters.
Well, you know, now that gas is more expensive than beer, you know, the advice is just drink beer and stay home. Don't stroll.
Don't waste your money on gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'll be here, and we'll repeat again next week.
Sounds good to me, Pete. Thanks for calling. Yeah, let's repeat. Okay, so we can put Robert Underwood and his misunderstanding of critical waste theory aside for the moment, and I never feel bad about putting Bavacqua stuff aside. Okay, and next we've got Shay versus Therese. Guam PDN. Shay Ways leaving Guam. Somebody posted on Facebook, I'll give him a ride to the airport. Dr. Thomas Shea said he will move his practice off-island if a change in Guam's medical malpractice law passes. Guam's current law requires those who wish to file a medical malpractice claim go through arbitration before filing in court. Opponents of the law say arbitration is so costly that it prevents people from filing at all. Speaker Therese Terlahi introduced Bill 112, which would replace the arbitration requirement with a screening by a magistrate judge. The bill has broad bipartisan support with 10 senators signed on as co-sponsors. It was 11 until bailout Barnes changed her mind.
She got barnstormed.
Or her blouse or her coat or something, yeah. Many members of the medical community have pushed back against repealing the current requirements, stating it would increase the number of frivolous claims and force doctors to reduce the scope of their practices. Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes, also known as Bailout Barnes, has withdrawn her co-sponsorship as a result of concerns from the medical community. Shea posted on his Facebook page on Wednesday that this may be his last year recognizing the Shea Su Ying Scholar Athletes on Guam, as he is considering a transition to Hawaii. When asked about the potential move, he said he would be going forward with it if Bill 112 passes. Dr. Shea said, I do sponsor a football team. However, if 112 passes, I'm going to take my ball and go home. If Bill 112 goes through, yes, Why would I want to stay in an environment where our leaders don't appreciate good doctors? He asked. Shea has been practicing as an OBGYN on Guam for over 20 years. He serves as president of the Guam Medical Association, and according to his website, has delivered over 8,800 babies on Guam. Shea said the current arbitration requirement is what helped to improve health care on Guam and increase the number of subspecialists on island. He maintains that people who have legitimate cases can still seek malpractice claims if they wish to do so. He doesn't object. Regardless of the arbitration case, they can still move to trial. If the case has merit, the attorney should take it on contingency. If not, they are not confident. If they are not confident, it's malpractice. One choice or the other. A lawyer takes it on contingency, or if any lawyer touches it, it's malpractice. According to him, at least, one specialist plans to relocate if the bill passes, and an inbound physician may decide not to move to Guam at all. Titlahi has requested input from the medical community in order to make Bill 112 more sound. But according to Shea, there's no way that he could find Bill 112 acceptable if it repeals the arbitration requirement. It won't hold bad doctors accountable, and it won't help us raise the standard of care. It will harm good doctors and harm patients' access to care. If they want to create something to truly hold bad doctors accountable and raise the standard of care, then I will work with them.
Exactly.
Why didn't you say so? You know what? Yeah. Hello, Therese. Yeah, Therese, this is Bob. Yeah. You know your Bill 112? We don't need it. Tom Shea said he'll help doctors improve their standard of care. Yeah. Yeah, I just read it on Tall Tales. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, good luck, Therese. Yeah, why didn't he say that sooner?
I don't understand this.
Gee whiz. During a June 25 press conference, Titlahi stated the pressure from the medical community to not advance the bill was tremendous. Lawmakers had been threatened or shut out for medical care for themselves and their families. If you don't pull Bill 112, I hope you don't get sick. Because I'm not going to treat you if you come to my office. You and your family. That's an interesting approach to practice.
No kidding.
To practicing medicine.
It's been really aggressive.
It has. Residents were also being turned down because of the bill's introduction. And we've seen reports of that Seventh-day Adventist is not taking certain kinds of new patients just because this bill was introduced. The Pacific Daily News contacted Titlahi's office for a response to Shea's statement. No response was received from the speaker as of 4 p.m. Very interesting, yeah. But my
this is like being held hostage.
It is.
I understand that there's a discussion to be had, but this is just getting really dirty.
Yeah. Yeah, never bring a knife to a scalpel fight. Yeah. Yeah, the doctors, some of the doctors said, we need to have our own recreation. Why don't we set up a softball team? And almost every single doctor, no, we play hardball. That's the only game we know is hardball.
Okay, once again, to clarify, Guam is the only place that mandates arbitration.
Yep.
Okay, so everywhere else has medical malpractice procedures.
Well, it's not the procedures, it's access to the courts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so undergoing or proceeding through arbitration is not a condition precedent to filing a suit in any of the states, at least any that I'm aware of. And that's what Therese has said. So I've tried to, I've looked at some of the, the broader aspects of this, and as I've said, almost every day on Tall Tales, we have two problems. One, how many of us there are, and two, how far away we are from the rest of the country. With 160 or 165,000, economies of scale are not available for us. Statehood is not available for us. A lot of other things that larger communities would be able to do, we can't do because we don't have enough people. So it's not, and then the second thing is, I doubt that doctors are tripping over themselves to give up their lucrative practices in the States to come to an island as far away from the United States as Guam is, if there aren't some incentives. And I suspect one of the recruiting incentives is to say, well, if you come over here, one thing we can tell you, you're not going to get sued for malpractice because we got the triple MAA. So those are all important considerations. But if Tom Shea had only come forward sooner, if they want to create something to truly hold bad doctors accountable and raise the standards of care, then I will work with them. Oh, he doesn't mean work with the doctors. He means work with the senators. But it could be either way, right? All right. I guess I probably got either Therese calling me back or Tom Shea calling to tell me about his latest success. It's neither one. It's Dr. Ron McNinch. Now, Dr. McNinch, if Bill 112 becomes law, are you going to move to the mainland because you don't want to get sued for malpractice?
Yeah, gosh, it's so interesting. There's a thing called malpractice insurance. What's wrong with these folks?
Well, what we've heard here on Tall Tales is that American Medical Center pays $500,000 for malpractice insurance. But there isn't enough information available about malpractice insurance. Some say, well, you just can't get it here. And others say, well, yeah, it's so expensive that it will drive people out of business. So no one, I don't think anyone has actually surveyed the insurance carriers here on the island to see what the real medical malpractice insurance picture is.
Yeah, and one other thing, Cinder, and I don't want to sound like I'm being negative or whatever, but
why not? This is Tall Tales, Ron. Come on, get with the program.
Every time I turn around when people are making these public advocacy, forays that they make, they don't let facts stand in their way. I mean, they make stuff up as they go along. In the classic example,
are we back to Bavacqua again?
Well, lots of folks, actually. I mean, it's incredible just how people don't rely on facts for anything. And then when you end up having something very important like this malpractice issue that needs community discussion, I got to tell you, and I hate to sound like this, but I don't think the issue is so much the doctors, it's just how we license doctors here. And I think if we changed and modified some of our licensure or the way that we approve doctors to practice here, that would really improve our ability to recruit and keep good doctors here. That's really, because right now the doctors control who can practice here. And
well, you're going to like the next item on the card, Doc. It's Macris versus the doctors. But along lines of what you're talking about, I think the lawyers on Guam do a pretty good job of self-regulation with the help of the Supreme Court. We disbar lawyers. We discipline lawyers that don't serve their clients properly.
Yes. And that's and the best, and I teach regulation coincidentally at the university. And the first line in every class, so I teach the class, is the best form of regulation is self-regulation. And, if you can police yourself or police your own profession, you don't need anybody. You don't need a social worker to come in and tell you how to parent your kids. If you can regulate, yourself. And it's just incredible. Hey, I wanted to mention something else. You mentioned that I think is very interesting. I call it the tyranny of distance issue we have here, and that is we're so far away from the U.S. mainland. Often it's like the Lord of the Flies, like the island on the Lord of the Flies. We end up having all kinds of things just go off the rails here. We end up having, these shenanigans with doctors go on and everything else. But you mentioned that really statehood is out of reach for us. Well, I understand the point that you made. I think standalone statehood might be out of reach for us, but we could always ask to be a county or district of Alaska, a county of Hawaii. There's different.
I've addressed that on more than one occasion, and here's the 411 on that.
Sure.
The first constitutional convention we had, the idea of Guam becoming a county of Hawaii, solving all our problems, we could vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It didn't get anywhere. Nobody on Guam wants to be a part of, a county of Hawaii. It's either.
And I wouldn't either, by the way.
No, I wouldn't either, and I wouldn't want to be a county of Alaska. So I don't think. But if you really want to talk about political status alternatives, we could ask the United States to petition the Federated States of Micronesia to admit Guam as one of the states. Or we could petition the government of the Philippines to have Guam admitted as a province of the Philippines. That's kind of the way
originally we were almost
back during the Spanish era. Yeah.
Right. Well, the other thing about it that I think is so interesting is that we can easily solve a lot of our problems if we choose to. We've just chosen not to, and we've discussed this many times. Why doesn't Guam have its own constitution?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why. Because the separatists will fight it tooth and nail. They're the reasons that we didn't ratify it the first time around, because if we have our own constitution, that means we're moving more in the direction of self-determination, and it takes one arrow out of their quiver. They don't want anything to change for the better. It's kind of like Lenin saying the worse things get, the better they are for us before the Russian Revolution. So they don't want.
It sounds like the summer, the Antifa summer we went through last year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Incredible. I know also that there's I call that the sit in ashes approach. They would rather sit in the burning, the burned out remnants of nothing, rather than get up and dust themselves off and build a new structure. And that's unfortunate because it's total inaction. I have to say I'm very pleased to see Speaker Talahe be the champion of trying to get something done with malpractice. But it's rare in our community. We live in a community of cowards for the most part. And I hate talking like that, but it's a reality. People are often in leadership positions afraid of their own shadows. And it's just incredible. You weren't. When you're in the legislature, you're willing to speak up and speak out. And that was a rare exception. I think Speaker Forbes was willing to speak up and speak out. And I didn't always agree with him, but he had the courage to actually do the job. And that's the scary part, is we end up having people who just want to make everyone else happy all the time. And you're not going to make people happy. You're not going to make people pleased. When you mention separatists, we're talking between 3 to 6% of a total population here. They're an extremely small number. They're not even, but that 3 to 6% are just so vocal, people get scared of them. They say boo and they run away.
The empty can makes the most noise when you roll it down the street.
Well, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets replaced too. And so I think that in general, there's a point when the interesting thing is, and this is one thing that bothered me a bit with the Davis case is that Guam passed the law, and they didn't have to pass the law that way. They could have given like a formal function to like the rather than the election commission, give it to one of the other commissions or agencies, and they could have done a formal poll to assess the status or the intentions of Chamorro people. And that's a healthy exercise. But because they wanted to embed it in the election process, it created a lot of negative dynamics. And, you know, it even cut out, I forget the number, it was 7,000 Chamorro people were technically ineligible because of the way they wrote that law. That is, if you were a descendant of a person who was already a U.S. citizen at the time that the Organic Act was passed, you weren't eligible to vote. And so, you know, and that was brought up by Davis's lawyer. He had that was one of the things that was brought up. But it's just incredible the animus that has been created over something like status, and it's just by a very small number of people. And because we live in a very dynamic and healthy, almost interracial community. 42% of our marriages are between people of different races. If we talk about general surveying the public, 70% of the public has one or more grandparents that are of a different race than the others. We live in a very diverse community, and that's why intersectarianism and all this CRT stuff people are talking about in the mainland, it doesn't apply to us because we're a unique, diverse case. But we have a lot of neat things we can offer the rest of the U.S. in that regard.
You're absolutely right, Ron. I hear the music in the background. So once again, if 112 passes, please, Dr. McNinch, don't take your practice to the States.
Hey, the only prescription I can give to people is call the governor.
All right. See you. Talk to you later.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. And that means I've only got 2 more innings of Tall Tales, not only just for today, but for this week. And we got a horrible 3-day weekend coming up with no Tall Tales. Somehow I think we're going to make it through. And let's see, I've got our Keith that wants to chime in, correct, Jose? Yeah, okay. What can you tell us this afternoon, Keith?
Good afternoon, Bob. Good afternoon, Jose. I just wanted a quick follow-up on what Dr. McNinch had said, and I couldn't possibly agree more. Guam's a wonderful place. I love it here. I'm a Caucasian from the mainland. I've been living on Hawaii for a number of years and didn't like it, was ready to move. I had an opportunity to move here. And so for fear of going from the proverbial frying pan into the fire, I did some online looking, and I talked to an awful lot of people. And I saw nothing but positives. I mean, you couldn't find a negative comment. The same could not be said about Hawaii. And the comments were exactly as what Dr. Ming had said, is that, people talk this whole diversity business and whether they really mean it or their motives or whatever. But Guam really is. I mean, it's amazing to me how, of all the places I've lived, this is the only one that I have lived in where really it just seems like people get along. And I sort of beg and beseech, please, people, do not let this very vocal, very hateful, racist minority ruin what you got here. I mean, it's a wonderful place. And that's that. Just a quick thought in the medical malpractice. Usually I have very little positive to say about Guam, but I have to change my tenor with this one. I'm pleased to see that there was some bipartisanship on a very important issue, and that both parties came together. And this is a problematic issue, and I'm pleased to see this bill come to fruition. I'm not surprised that it's Speaker Tlahi. I find her to be very effective. I like her, even though she's from the opposite party from me. If I think one gauge of whether a piece of legislation is worthwhile or not is whether Tina Barnes is on it. And since she bailed, well, that to me is that just sort of goes to show.
That's the endorsement, right?
Yeah,
stamp of approval.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So this and a quarter will get you a cup of coffee, I know, but hats off to the legislature. It's rare that I give them a compliment, but I got to give credit where credit's due.
Okay, Arcades, I go along with you 100% on. Thank you very much for calling.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good Fourth.
Okay, see you later. So, on this idea of diversity, we really have diversity here, don't we? Like McNinch was mentioning how much intermarriage there has been here, and how everyone does seem to get along pretty well here in our little slice of paradise. I couldn't agree with that more. Yeah, I got another. Who else but our Carl, right? Okay, so we got the most dangerous man in the room on the line here.
Hey, Bob, sorry I had to turn my radio off.
Yeah, there's your theme song, Carl.
All right. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to comment today, except about one thing, and this is this whole idea of diversity, and that phrase, diversity is our strength. The United States, diversity is not our strength. We just happen to be diverse because we have drawn in a lot of legal immigrants that have contributed a great deal to the country. But that isn't our strength. Our strength has been our unity. Once they've been drawn in, and a lot of them had to overcome tremendous obstacles to get to the United States. My wife and her family had to go through, filling out all the paperwork, the interviews, long waiting periods. They had to find, someone to sponsor them. And that was the entire family that came here like that. So there's a tremendous desire for immigrants to legally immigrate to America. But once they come here, we have a process of integrating them into society and, teaching them the basics of our history, learning about our form of government and, various things, our personal freedoms. And this is what is our strength, is our unity, our motto, our national motto is E pluribus unum.
if I could jump in here for a second, Carl, you're absolutely right. From many, one. So, diverse populations has never, if you look at world history, have never, look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire, look at some other places, other countries where they have attempted to make diverse, where there is diverse races, religions, languages, etc. It's not a strength. It's something that has to basically be overcome. And that's certainly the United States, where we have people from all over the world who don't have that common language, religion, race, etc. at the beginning. But the thing that's made the country work is that up until now, we had an ideology that held us all together. We all, most Americans believed that we could govern ourselves, that we didn't need dictators or kings to govern us, that the most important things were individual freedom. And that's our strength. But the CRT folks are going as hard as they can to break down our strength and emphasize our weakness. Go ahead. I just had to jump in there.
Yes, I just wanted to point that out because that phrase is thrown around a lot, and it really is. It's true. It's not true. Thomas Sowell has given the example of India as a country that is extremely diverse. It's got dozens and dozens and dozens of languages and ethnicities that are evolved over centuries. And there's internal strife. There's all kinds of violence. When they broke apart the country, to create Pakistan, the Muslim place for Muslim Indians to go to. There's hundreds of thousands of people that died. Hundreds of thousands. And there's been periods of just extreme violence. Killings, mass killings. And this is an extremely, extremely diverse country. So I just wanted to, point that out, that our strength is our unity, and that's why the left goes after our unity. They have actually flipped it around from e pluribus unum, from many one, to e unum pluribus, from one many. They're actually in the process of dividing us up into various cliques and groups and racial groups and sex groups and any way to get us at each other's throats. This is catnip for the left. They love this stuff. And the objective is to disintegrate the United States from within, create disorder, create chaos, and like you said, what Lenin was supposed to have said, the worse the better. People just want, this is horrible. Just make it go away, whatever. If it makes socialism, fine. Let's just make it better. And that's the whole objective of this. They can't stand unity. That's the worst condition that the left wants to see in Americans. Blacks getting along with whites, getting along with Latinos, getting along with gays and straights, everybody, That's the absolute worst thing, the last thing they want. Anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to rant a little bit. I just wanted to toss that in for my 2 bits. Okay,
Carl. It's always good to talk to you. Thanks for calling.
All right, likewise.
Okay, so let's head for Churchill Downs here. It's about time for the home stretch on Tall Tales.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vax and Win, Guam!
Okay, so here we go. Next item on the card. Maybe I'll check and see who's in the green room here. Another Joe. Another Joe, can you wait until I finish Macris versus the Docs? Next item on the card is Macris versus Docs. Doctors, in other words. And let me tell you a little bit about George Macris. He's a former Guam Memorial Hospital medical director, former Guam Medical Society president, former Board of Medical Examiners member, and a retired Naval Reserve medical officer who practices in Florida and Hawaii, and until recently the CNMI. He's certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and American Board of Preventive Medicine in Undersea and Hyperbaric Medicine. He lives in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and he does very regular cameo appearances on the Ray Gibson Show.
Always look forward to him.
Yeah, he's a good radio talker. So once again, he's been the medical director at the Guam Memorial Hospital. So he's not someone who is a stranger to what goes on in Guam, and he's not exactly let's make everybody feel good kind of guy. Here's what he said. Whatever the cause, most healthcare providers on Guam abhor unexpected patient mortality and morbidity, but some could care less. Most, but some could care less. In the U.S., 1% of physicians were responsible for 32% of paid malpractice claims. On Guam, the healthcare providers' mafia of sorts enforces omerta. That's the code of silence. By punishing healthcare providers and staff who attempt to expose even serially injurious provider sacred cows or practices. Healthcare provider caucuses can make decisions based upon politics and money without following the rules of evidence. Out-of-control healthcare provider boards, administrators and committees can conduct sham peer reviews and invent violations which threaten the employment privileges and licenses of whistleblowers, and do so with qualified immunity and without oversight. Not painting a pretty picture, is he? Public Law 24-84 intended to improve medical practice by shielding peer review findings done at local hospitals, and mandatory arbitration meant to attract and retain qualified, that is, insurable healthcare professionals have failed, if not backfired. Whoa. Now, this is the first time we've had a doctor that's actually bucking the traces, so to speak. Healthcare professionals or providers, regulatory agency members need to be very, very carefully vetted. So when somebody gets appointed to the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, let's put the rubber stamp down there at confirmation hearings. Let's put that rubber stamp away. Peer review committee and licensing board adverse action should be unenforceable unless there is an evidentiary hearing and a judicial determination. Whistleblower healthcare professional staff if employees, whether private, classified, or unclassified by law, should be placed on paid leave or allowed to practice until such determination is made. When industries or professions ineffectively regulate themselves in a manner that creates hazards to health and public safety, lawyers, unfortunately, need to get involved. Yeah, and it's you know, when you see lawyers descend on an industry, it's not good news for anybody. However, any proposed medical malpractice reform should include a statute of limitations and reasonable award caps. Well, he's really, that sentence really doesn't fit into the rest of his article. He's laying much of the blame for whatever problems we have on the doctors themselves. And, you know, that being the case, it's pretty easy to go back to Shakespeare and to quote that line, he thinks they dust protest too much. Yeah. That's George Macris, a very colorful guy, a very valuable member of the medical profession until he left. Okay, I'm going to give another Joe a few minutes here to talk about medical malpractice. What can you tell us about medical malpractice, another Joe?
Hey, Bob, that gentleman that lost his son over at GMH, how is that different from the other case? The same-sex guy says things that you protest too often. How do you distinguish, you know, what the difference is?
You gotta say it again. I didn't pick it up. Another Joe.
And how do you distinguish what is protesting or complaining too much, and what is reasonable? Was it the responsibility of doctors?
I still don't understand.
I think he's asking how do we discern the legitimacy of a complaint, like Lebowski's
against a doctor, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in our society governed by the rule of law, we have the judiciary, and we have civil suits to settle disputes between individuals. That's basically the way we do it. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're on the Lebowski side, we're saying, yeah, it's great. Courts are good at resolving disputes. But because of the triple MAA, it's so expensive to get into court, we can't use it. And the doctors are saying, yeah, that's true. And as I simplified it yesterday, the doctors are basically saying, if you enact Bill 112, it's going to be a good news, bad news. The good news is you'll be able to sue doctors. The bad news is there won't be any doctors left to sue because they're all going to go away for the reasons we've talked about. So I don't know if that gets at your question or not, another Joe.
Yeah, sure, kind of. Okay, thanks for your time, and hope to hear from you all on, was it Tuesday?
Yeah, we'll be here Tuesday. We'll make it. Somehow we'll make it, another Joe. Okay, so let's see. I got about 4 more minutes. Huh?
You know, Dr. Mattress made a point. Macris.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Dr. Mattress. Yeah.
I'm not a surgeon.
Dr. Mattress got a great bedside manner.
I'm not a surgeon. I'm a butcher. But he made a point about he didn't say use the words, but it sounded like intimidation, right? Mm-hmm. And that gave me pause to think about this 30-page list of they call it countersigners.
Yeah.
And when you have a situation like that, it kind of makes you think about the legitimacy of the intention of signing. Did they go to the clinics and then everybody signed it at once? Or did these people come to the office and sign it as individuals? Because there is a difference, whether you think there isn't or not. It's easier for me to sign something with my own intentions if my boss is not looking over my shoulder.
It's kind of like why we have secret ballot elections, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it done that way? Or when for those places that paid with paper checks, was the countersigned paper right there when you picked up your check? or
and these
maybe
are legitimate questions. These aren't. We're not saying absolutes here, but you know.
Yeah. How was it that Tina Rose was able to get 477 on disparate pages? Obviously, it's, you know, and my suspicion is that somebody in the medical profession said, Tina, withdraw from this bill, and Tina said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to send a letter. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go out and get some people to sign on with you if you give us, you know, the papers, etc. And the whole lying in wait aspect of that whole drill. You know, Tina signed a letter on June 1, and she hung on to it until Teresa's first informational hearing.
A pounce from the grass.
Yeah, and then comes sliding in through the back door, smoke coming out of her stink bomb, and tosses it in and runs away. Okay, folks, it's going to be tough, but Jose and I will be back next Tuesday. Think of us over this long weekend. Goodbye, tailgaters.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Digging again in Florida. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. At the site of the condo building collapse in Surfside, north of Miami. Rescue work halted early Thursday over fears the remaining section of the building, still standing, could come down.
This was following the recommendations of our structural engineers. They had taken the time to study the conditions to make sure things were safe.
Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. President Biden met with family members and first responders Thursday.
Our message today is that we're here for you as one nation, as one nation. And that's the message we communicated.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency has sent more than $20 million to the state of Florida to help pay for the response to the collapse. All U.S. and coalition military personnel have now left the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, handing it over to the Afghan military. President Biden says all but a handful of American troops will be out of the country by September 11th. Severe weather bashing the nation's capital Thursday evening. The National Weather Service will survey the damage to determine whether a tornado may have touched down. An American Airlines jet was disabled on the tarmac at Reagan National Airport, apparently by high winds. In its final rulings of the term Thursday, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a lower court ruling to restore provisions